New ban list means new thought dump video. Hurrah! Uh, Now, what can I actually say about this list? I suppose the first thing I should point out is this, which is when it's the last day that the list will actually take place, which is kind of odd. So we're just gonna have like 3.5 months, I guess. I thought it'd be like taking place right at the start of July, but I guess not. Gonna have another couple of weeks with it, but I don't know. Definitely sort of a new thing that happened. But anyways, they didn't actually do a whole lot with this ban list. I think this might actually be like a flow-on effect from the last year's September list, because they moved a whole lot of shit around left, right, and center with that list, and about maybe half the player base started having a shit fit over it. So they're basically just like, okay, well then it might not be such a good idea to move that much shit. But for this one, they seem to be like, don't really want to move that much. I don't know. I don't know whether they wanted. I don't know. I'm not too sure if they wanted to avoid such a backlash again. But even though, like every ban list they release, there's going to be some kind of backlash from some portion of the player base. I guess they just want to minimize that, but they're still probably going to cause a whole bunch of it. Because so we're going to start off with the banned cards here, and these are the only two banned cards. The Brothers Morphing Jar. Theoretically, I should be cheering about the loss of Morphing Jar 1, because it's basically just a card destruction in a pot. But like it was never played anywhere near as often as card destruction was, because card destruction is readily available. Morphing Jar is much slower, and if the opponent pops it, then you're in a bit of deep trouble. I mean, I went up against one Dark World deck that ran it, but aside from that, they don't really run it that much, I'm just been lucky enough not to see Morphing Jar at all. But yeah, it's more likely the former of those two theories. But yeah, in that regard, I suppose it's not really so much deserving to get banned, but it's there and it doesn't really affect me too much. Neither does Morphing Jar number 2, which I think is even less deserving of it. But I don't know. People seem to think that Ghost Tricks run this, but I haven't seen a build that does. Maybe sided, but even then I'm not too sure about it. I mean, I did have this sided in a couple of decks. I think I had it sided to Chaos Dragons, and it was kind of lackluster. So being not allowed to use this, I don't really care too much. Really, it's just it's not really going to do that. I mean, the only deck that this thing kills is Jackpot 7. I mean, there's a Jackpot 7 that runs some kind of Dark Scorpion build, but aside from that, I mean, there is one deck that runs one of each of these and then just goes through the entire deck after its creature it sets the jar, it creature swaps, and then it flips it using something like Swords or Eclipse or something like that. It forces it up and kind of just does that. But yeah, it just seems a bit, I don't know. But like I said, it's not really going to affect me. It's not really going to affect that many people. I don't think anybody should even care unless Morphing Jar was like their favourite card, in which case they can have their own little cry over it. But it does nothing to affect most of the player base. Anyways, yeah, no more cards are banned. Nothing's come back. So anything that's at 1 is being put to 1 brand new. Such as Coach Soldier Wolfbark, which is probably the strongest of the 3 links. I mean, people were like, Tanky needs to go to 1, Ban needs to go to 1, Wolfbark needs to go to 1. I think the most likely one of these to happen probably was actually Tanky, but Wolfbark was definitely coming in a close second, and Wolfbark actually got the hit. And surprisingly enough, Tanky didn't. I say surprisingly enough because there were a lot of people calling for it to get put to 1, but it didn't get put to 1 anyway. And this actually didn't do so much as surprise me, but because I was sort of expecting Tenki to remain at 3 because of the whole Boojin thing, and they haven't actually hit Boojins at all. Nothing's been hit from the Boojin setup, so they're going to be good next format. And the same thing with Constella's actually, because Constella's never got hit either, so they're gonna do well as well next format. But with Wolfbark being put to 1, I'd imagine, Like, 3 was ridiculous, especially since people were valuing them at like 40, 50, 60 bucks. Hopefully, with only 1 being able to be used, there'll be a whole bunch of them. Just like, basically anybody who runs 5 fists now has to take 2 of their wolf barks and basically put them into their trade binder. And I think right at the start of the format, then they'll try to try to get it for as much as they milk it for as much as they can, so that might not actually drop the price immediately, but I think after some period of time it probably will drop the price, and then eventually, you know, there'll be a reprint which just makes the secret worth like $10, like what our Rescue Rabbit is now. So I think that's probably going to be the flow-on effect sort of thing from this thing being put to 1. Hopefully it's down to a reasonable price that I can actually get my hands on one of them on a copy now. Because it would be nice for me to use it in my Glad Rabbit deck. Yeah, I've had a Gladiator Beast Rabbit sort of build, and I might show that off a little bit later, but whatever. It's nothing to do with the video at this rate. But yeah, anyways, Mermails have finally taken another hit, or a hit in general, and that is Abyss Gun to 1, and absolutely nothing else. I mean, aside from the obvious hits that they took earlier. I mean, gunned to 1. Some people can definitely say that they called this, because gunned is a pretty damn awesome card, but I don't think it's going to really affect the deck that much. They can easily recycle this thing. It just decreases how often you'll be able to draw into them, which even then, that matters to absolutely nothing, because you can still search it with Pike. So it's not actually going to... I don't think this is going to make any sort of effect on the deck whatsoever. I still think the deck's actually going to be good next format. Because unless they hit something like Sphere and or Lend, then this deck's still going to be pretty damn decent. So, yeah. Rekindling to 1. Thank God. This thing should have happened a good 6 or so months ago. Because the amount of times that this thing is spammed by stuff like Fire Kings and the Larval setup, this thing just needed to be, at the very least, put to 1. I mean, I'd like to see it get banned because of how broken as hell it is, but at least I could deal with it at 1, because at least that way they're not going to be able to draw into it anywhere near as often, because Triple Rekindling should never have even been in 3 in the first place, because when they saw the potential that this thing had, it was just like, oh shit, the amount of synchros they can drop and whatnot. And things got even worse in the Larval setup when Quasar come out, because they can do that sort of jazz. Which we actually still can't do down here in Australia, because Quasar, at the moment, its only print is still the Jump promo print, and that means it's not tournament legal down here or over in Europe. So we've never actually had the Larval sort of thing going on, and for the record, it should, yeah, it's just like, yeah. Infinity Barrier. Part of me sort of seems surprised about it, but at the same time, I really shouldn't be, and sort of am not. It's rather mixed, this one, because, like, basically my reaction when I saw Infinity Barrier was just like, oh yeah, that's the card. Yes, thank God. So it's just like, I think it's the fact that I overlooked it being a card in general that sort of yielded just that little bit of surprise from me. But aside from that, it's a pretty busted ass card. I think it does actually need to get hit. So that's a bit of a positive note right there. So they'll have to rely more on their Infinity Breaks and whatnot to for the field clearance, and Void Ogre, because that's still a thing. 2 new cards going to 2. Necroface, I'm a bit dubious about this one in all honesty, because this can open up the way for some kind of troll deck to, like, banish Necrofaces and then banish cards, because, like, if you luck out really, really hard, you can Gold Sark, banish your Necroface, and then banish this second Necroface off of that first Necroface, and then just, unless there's some kind of a fail-safe that prevents that from happening or something like that. But yeah, I don't usually look at Necroface that often, because it doesn't seem to be that interesting of a card to me. I mean, I know I've got a copy because I got it from a special edition of some bloody thing a while back, but yeah, it's just sort of, I'm not even going to go on too much of a tangent about Necroface. I mean, I'm not too sure that it should be at 2, but it is, and I'm going to just deal with it. And and hieratic seal of Convocation at 2, which, I'm going to be honest with you, having played the deck myself, and actually liking the deck quite a lot, I still think Convocation should have been put to 1. I think 2's still a bit too much for it. I mean, because you've got dualities, you've got the Convocation, you're still going to get very quick bloody combo pieces. Because Convocation literally is, like, if you don't open with a Tefnuit or something, Convocation literally is a Tefnuit. Literally is. Like, you basically went from 6 Tefnuit to 5 Tefnuit, essentially. So, it's just, I honestly thought that they should have put Convocation to 1, and then both Iset and Tefnuit to at least maybe 2, maybe 1, but I'm not too sure about 1 at all. But I don't think they've hit hieratics quite as well, quite as hard as they probably should have. But I suppose if they're going to keep making money off that by people splashing the Dragon Rulers in with it, then I guess then we can just sort of deal with it. I mean, I'm not going to have any complaints about it. Convocation at 3 was a bit ridiculous anyway. And then 2 new cards that are coming off the ban list and are unlimited. Magical Stone Excavation. I don't really see how anybody should even care about this unless there's some kind of unless once again there's some kind of trollsy deck that can run triple excavation and just be incredibly sacky with it. But I mean, people overlook the card anyway. It's just one of those things where it was good for a time, and now it's just kind of lackluster. Nobody uses it. There's no reason to keep it on the ban list at any sort of restriction. So just do it, and if it becomes good again, then we'll just put it back on the ban list. It's just one of those things. And I'm not too sure about Konami's thought process with this. If it's the same, then even that is enough for me to want to slap them in the face. Why is Primal Seed at 3? This is the one change in the ban list that I can definitely say I am against with every fibre of my being. Because Macro is at 1, but it's still a card. And Banisher of the Radiance is still a card. I'm sure many people have seen stuff involving looping 2 copies of Primal Seed around and being able to recycle stuff like basically any spell you want, like Upstart Goblin. Basically, now that's possible to do in the advanced format, which basically opens the door to Exodia decks that can spam the crap out of this. Basically, the way that works is you have to have a light and dark monster in your graveyard, you have to flip up Macrocosmos, and then you banish that light and dark for BLS, or not even Macrocosmos. If you've got like a Banisher of the Radiance, then that will suffice as well. Basically, you have one of those 2 on the board, you banish a light and dark from your graveyard to special the BLS, you then use Upstart or whatever thing you wanted to recycle. But Upstart's the most commonly used one. You draw your card, it gets banished, you then use Primal Seed to get back one of the monsters that you banished along with the Upstart, and then you reuse the Upstart, and then you use the second Primal Seed in hand to get the first one back, and then the Upstart, and then you just use then you just keep using the Upstart, and then interchanging the 2 Primal Seeds and just one recycling the other and getting the Upstart Goblin back. So you can draw as many cards as you want. Your opponent's not going to complain because it's just like, your opponent will like initially not complain because he's getting, oh my god, I have so many life points, you're not going to win this game. It's just like, dude, I have Exodia, you lose. And then that's when they just start going rage. And I don't even know why in the hell this I don't even know why in the hell this had to happen. It's really, really stupid. I mean, there was a slightly slower sort of build that runs Raw Magical Library, and I think at least I still think Library should be put to 1. I mean, if they were going to put Primal Seed to 3, then maybe they could have at least put Upstart or Library to 1, and they didn't do either of these. So I don't know how often I'm going to see decks like these. Hopefully nowhere near as often as they should be. I mean, with Macro at 1. And not to mention, this has also changed my entire opinion on Macro. Because, like, when it first got put to 1, I think back in September, I think it was, I was just like, okay, this isn't, I'm not going to really care too much about this. I can just deal with this. I mean, Makarub is not really quite as much of a thing now as it used to be because Rabbit got put to 1 in the same list. But now I'm basically just like, okay, it cannot come back to anything higher than 1 because Primal Seed exists. And I don't even know. Like I said, it's the only thing that I actually dead set against. And aside from that, it seems as if, as said at the top of this video, it doesn't seem to me as if they've done enough with this list to make a drastic change to the format. Because, I mean, people are still going to run 3-axis. 4-axis have taken a very slight hit, but are still good. Urges never got touched. Momals haven't been touched enough. Evil Swarms haven't been touched, which, although in all fairness on Evil Swarms, they're not really quite as relevant. Hieratics haven't been touched enough. Basically all the good cards have not been touched enough. Constellas have not been touched, period. And that is actually quite awesome. It is quite relevant to my interests, because now I can take Constellas into the next format and just be like, huzzah. So, that's it for this entire list. That's all the thoughts and processes I have about it. Long story short, didn't do anywhere near as much as most people thought that it would, but still did something stupid, but by putting Primal Seed to 3. That shouldn't really have happened. But yeah, anyways, end of thought dump video. See you for whatever I do next.